Yeah, hi. My name's Lazaro Fuentes. If we could change slide here. Well, actually, let's see here. This is really something that is near and dear to me, so I think that's why I'm here. I'm not an expert by any stretch, and I'm really excited to be able to introduce what I think is one of the champions of sort of a new era of thinking for liver disease and how to sort of standardize and increase better outcomes for patients. And I'm here for a reason, and I think the next slide will start to point that out pretty clearly. No, not that one. This one, yeah. So I was a first responder during 9/11. And at the World Trade Center, I was in charge of all military personnel, the personnel on the site for the first week. And so really right in the beginning, and then I handed it off to the state. But as a result of that, I there's a very direct correlation between when that happened and when my liver enzymes started to get really bad. And over those years, I didn't really know what was happening. But then fast forward to May 2019, and I get a diagnosis. And if you look on the left side there, I was told that I have cirrhosis. And that was what I looked like then. I had 30% steatosis. And I was very lucky to have a doctor that was helping me, and I'll mention his information in a minute. But really, by lifestyle changes that I was able to very quickly jump on, because look, I never really knew anything about this. I knew nothing at all. I knew that I had liver enzymes were elevated. That's what people would tell me. But the moment I found out that this was such a dire, it felt like a death sentence, like I was, not going to be around much longer. But I was told by a good doctor, hey, this is beatable. You can beat this. You're at a point right now where if you do the right things, if you make the correct changes, we can together beat this. And now fast forward to last month, and I'm an F2, F3. So, and I'm in a strange, what I think is a strange, and I'll let the doctors sort of decide what it is. I'm in a strange place because there's zero fat in my liver right now. That's the reality is that I got it to about 16.7 without the help of a study that I'm currently in, just with lifestyle changes, going from 30 to, or from 26 to 16.7. But now my steatosis is 0. My blood work is all but normal. Even my diabetes is gone. And next screen, this is what that looks like. This is just before the diagnosis on the left. This is this summer on the right. We can change this now. It's possible. You can accomplish this, and I think that that's something that's very important. And I think that it really is about having the right doctors. And there's one that's capitalized there, and it's Dr. Ayman Askapur, and I really have to thank him because he was just intensely empathetic. He was on my team. It was not like me alone. He wasn't on his way to his next appointment. He was in the room. He was present. He was there telling me, we can do this. This is what you have to do. And I remember, right, because Dr. Lai is on here, but I didn't, Dr. Lai is not my doctor, but she technically was, because I remember him sitting there calculating the amount of protein. And now I find out, a year and a half later, that he's using a calculation that comes from what are the new guidelines that are being, that were just published by the AASLD. And of course, Dr. Bansal, who's the reason why I'm here, she suggested that I come here and that I tell this story. And she's guiding the study that I'm in, and that's been very helpful. And kind of life-changing, right? Well, and Dr. Kushner, who took over for Dr. Asrapur when he moved to another hospital, who I'm very thankful she puts up with my 1,000 questions, and she gets a hold of Dr. Lai when I have something that's related to nutrition, and they confer. And then, of course, Dr. Lai, who, unbeknownst to her probably until we met for this, was really someone who had a profound effect on my future and my life, because my clinicians, my doctors, were following guidelines that they happened to have, known because of their engagement with her work. And then I really want to talk about a couple things. People are terrified when they get this cirrhosis diagnosis. So understand that. I know that you all who are clinicians see this all the time, but we don't. And for the most part, I think something like 40% never knew that this was even a possibility. And this is the word cirrhosis in the minds of patients who don't know is a death sentence, right? And so this is terrifying. And there's ways to change these outcomes. And, we need more of the community to understand that they can coach people through this and get a nutritionist in your practice. If you don't have a nutritionist, that's a real problem. And it's not like, don't hand it off to the endocrinologist, because sarcopenia, because all the other things that are related to liver disease are not the same as the considerations for endocrinology. We need people who understand what we're going through and who could fashion something for us. And then, so before we move on to Dr. Lai, I want to talk about first responders and advocacy for them. So next page. I was a first responder. I acquired this racing towards the towers. And the reality is that we're suffering from liver disease at 4 times the rate of the regular population. And this was a study which, by the way, when I found this information, I didn't even realize it was Mount Sinai where I have all my care, and who I'm very, very thankful for. But yeah, it's becoming really clear that they are suffering. And the problem that's occurring is that this 9/11 liver issue is something that is not being monitored or coordinated in any way. And that's bad, because there's not billions, but hundreds of millions of dollars that's been put aside for the Zadroga Act. And oddly enough, they'll cover cancer, but this, which if we get ahead of it, will help reduce cancer incidence, they're not looking into. So I hope that everyone here will yell at their congressman and tell them, hey man, include 9/11 liver in future funds for this. But again, none of this would have been possible. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that there are people championing this cause. And Dr. Lai is, the top champion of nutrition as a way to improve outcomes. And she's been driving this home. And I pass it over to Dr. Lai because I think she's got the real message here today.
Thank you so much, Laz. That was such an incredibly powerful message. And I really want to thank you for the reminder that it really is a partnership between patients and their providers to make this happen. So honestly, I would say you also are a key champion in this. So thank you for your story. Here are my disclosures. I'm Jennifer Lai. I am an associate professor of medicine and clinical investigator at the University of California, San Francisco, where I direct the clinical research arm for liver research of UCSF Health. But first and foremost, I'm a hepatologist, and I care for patients living with chronic liver disease. I originally chose hepatology as my field of practice and my life passion because quite frankly, I love the liver. I love everything that the liver does for us, for our bodies. But importantly, I love everything that doctors can do to help diagnose and manage liver diseases at its early stages, and ultimately even transplant the liver. We can replace a cirrhotic liver to help a patient live 5, 10, 20 years longer than they otherwise would have. But what I have learned over my last 15 years in clinical practice of managing patients with liver disease is that when the liver fails, the body does too. And my patients have told me time and time again that they feel like they're getting weaker. They feel like they are frail, even when we have optimized the medical therapies to the liver itself. And what ultimately drove me from clinical practice into research was the lack of tools to understand this frailty that was happening to our patients, and the lack of ways to communicate the therapies that are needed to help manage frailty. And it was this lack of tools, lack of methods of communication to our patients that I felt was leaving our patients with this underlying sense that there was nothing that they could do, that there was nothing in their control to manage their frailty and improve their overall health and well-being. But that is absolutely not true. The mainstay therapy for managing frailty in the setting of advancing liver disease is nutrition. And my mission is for you, the patient, to understand what I know as a doctor, which is that for patients living with chronic liver disease, nutrition is a therapeutic. But as with any pill, a standard therapeutic, where you need to understand which pill to take at which dose, at what times of the day, for how long, you need to understand how to make food work for your liver and to ultimately work for you. And that is my objective today, to empower you, the patient living with chronic liver disease, with liver-focused pragmatic strategies to eating well that are informed by the scientific evidence to date. Nutritional strategies differ by the stage of liver disease. So chronic liver disease, any liver disease, whether it be fatty liver disease, whether it be chronic hepatitis B or C or autoimmune disease or PSC, leads to inflammation of the liver cells, which then leads to scarring of the liver, what we doctors like to call fibrosis, which over time leads to a lot of fibrosis and what many of us know is the term cirrhosis, or the end stage of scarring. The liver has this remarkable capacity to preserve all of its functional capabilities. It will clean your body of toxins, help metabolize drugs, make so many of the proteins essential to life, all the way through this inflammation and scarring process, up until the time when your liver has cirrhosis, at which point the function of the liver becomes impaired. And it is this principle of liver function that drives the nutritional strategies that we as providers will recommend to you, which is that up until at these earlier stages, when your liver does not have cirrhosis, the nutritional strategy is really to protect the liver. Use nutrition as a therapeutic to protect your liver. And it is only when your liver function is impaired, when you have cirrhosis, that the nutritional strategy shifts to supporting the body's needs. So I want to start with this first portion of the nutritional strategy, which is to protect the liver. Now, please keep in mind that these strategies that I will be discussing next are for patients with chronic liver disease, but without cirrhosis. Now, I could not sum up this strategy any better than the food writer, Michael Pollan, who said in his book, In the Defense of Food, eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. Just sums up this strategy perfectly. Now, when it comes to eating food, the first portion, you might be surprised to know that there's actually only one food or one sort of naturally occurring substance that really time and time again has been shown to protect the liver, and that is coffee. Now, keep in mind, I did not show you a picture of this. I did not show you even a picture of this, although more recent data suggests that there might be some benefits of decaf coffee, but I don't think that there's an overwhelming body of evidence to support decaf coffee over caffeinated coffee. And I didn't even really show you a picture of this, although there are probably some of the literature does suggest that there are some benefits of caffeinated tea. But really, the overwhelming evidence really supports just this. You can even sort of smell the aroma of the beautiful cup of black coffee coming through the screen. There are a number of observational population-based studies that have demonstrated that black coffee will protect the liver from inflammation. So in patients with chronic liver diseases, the liver enzymes, black coffee has been associated with decreased liver enzymes like AST and ALT. Black coffee has been associated with decreased progression of scarring of the liver. It has been associated with decreased development of cirrhosis in patients with chronic liver disease. It's even been associated with a decreased risk of liver cancer. So you might, hopefully you're convinced of drinking black coffee. And so you might ask, well, how much? Well, what I think is the most convincing evidence for black coffee is that the more coffee, the better. I've seen studies that have shown even up to 6 cups of black coffee a day are probably protective. But the big body of evidence suggests that somewhere between about 3 to 4 cups of black coffee per day is quite protective. So drink away. Now, that's the eat food portion of Michael Pollan's quote. The second portion is not too much. And in order to implement this portion of Michael Pollan's phrase, I want to refer to the teachings of another wise individual, and that's Confucius, when he said, "Eat until you are 70% full." I think this is one of the places where the Western and the American diet has gone a little bit wrong. We tend to eat to maximum capacity. And I would recommend that every time you sit down to eat a meal, you should eat a meal to satisfy hunger. You should eat a meal to satisfy your soul and for the social aspects, but we're not aiming here to eat till you're maximally full and you can't even breathe because you're so full, or you have to start unbuttoning your pants. That's probably too much. And I think that one of the ways to get a handle on portion sizes and fullness is actually the hand guide to serving sizes. So, I want you to take a look at your hand and just know that a portion of meat or fish is probably about 1 palm full. Okay. And I want you to think about that in reference to the last piece of meat or fish you ate. I mean, I'm even thinking about mine, and it was probably at least 1.5, if not 2 servings. If you're thinking about some of the condiments like peanut butter, cream cheese, salad dressing, let's think about even a thumbful as a serving. Fats like butter or oil, the fingertip. Cereal, pasta, edamame, vegetables, fruit, a fistful. And then when we're talking about the snacks that we all love to eat, nuts, small snacks, pretzels, pita chips, maybe kind of a handful for the really dense foods. And then for like a pretzel or pita chip, you can give yourself 2 handfuls, but that's 1 serving size. Okay. So just get a sense. I'm not saying you have to eat 1 serving size only, but that when you're eating a palm and a half or a fistful and a half, you're really eating more than 1 standard serving size. The data have clearly shown that excess calories, excess portions are associated with fatty liver disease. There are many studies, but here's an interesting one that I've seen. patients with fatty liver disease consume 500 to 600 additional calories per day compared to controls or patients without fatty liver disease. So it is, although this is just an associative study, it wasn't a randomized clinical trial, it's very clear with many bodies of evidence that excess calories are contributing to the worsening and the increase of liver disease, particularly fatty liver disease. And this fatty liver disease can worsen any other chronic liver diseases like hepatitis B or autoimmune hepatitis. Now, if you're looking for a relatively straightforward way of cutting out 500 to 600 additional calories per day, I am going to suggest this. You don't need this. You don't need this. And you definitely don't need the smoothie, which is going to be packed with calories. I know a lot of people say, well, what about the smoothies with protein and all these extra nutrients in it? You know, I recommend that you eat the fruit, eat the banana, eat the berries, eat the spinach whole rather than in a smoothie. And if you wanted any more evidence to try to cut out some of these sugar sweetened beverages, I want you to look no further than this super interesting study that took individuals, they were all overweight, but otherwise did not have liver disease. And they asked them over a course of 6 months to drink 1 liter of regular sugar sweetened cola, milk, diet cola, or water. So there were 4 different groups. And at the end of 6 months, what they showed was, oh, someone's drawing on my screen. What they showed was that the only group that had worsened liver fat, worsened visceral fat, which is that unhealthy fat inside your belly, and worsened muscle fat was the regular cola group. And there was no change in the fat content of the body of those who drank milk, diet cola, or water. And so I would say one of the easiest ways to protect your liver is to eliminate the added sugar soda. Okay, so let's go to the third portion of Michael Pollan's phrase, which is to eat mostly plants. There is very strong data at this point, strong evidence that suggests that the Mediterranean diet is very beneficial for patients with chronic liver disease, particularly those with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, the Mediterranean diet is a plant-centered diet, so it's very plant-forward. It's rich with vegetables, fruits, dietary fiber. 30 to 40% of the calories are coming from fats. So it's actually considered to be a high fat diet, but notably the fats are the good or the healthy fats. They are rich with monounsaturated fatty acids, or those of you who are really into Googling this stuff, they're known as MUFAs, as opposed to the saturated fatty acids. And this diet has a lot of evidence now, and even more. Every week there's a new study coming out that's been shown that the Mediterranean diet really does reduce liver fat and is quite beneficial for patients in particular with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So let's get a little bit more into the specifics of the Mediterranean diet. I'm just going to pause for a second to see if I can get rid of these lines. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. So if we're talking about the Mediterranean diet, I want you to think about this food triangle. And it's very rich in these whole grains. So on a daily basis, you can do whole grains, rice, couscous, 2 to 3 servings of fruits and nuts, 2 to 3 servings of olive oil, 2 to 3 servings per day of milk, cheese, and yogurt. On a weekly basis, now we're thinking about the traditional proteins that you're thinking about: fish and seafood, poultry and eggs, and that's only 2 to 4 times per week, okay? And sweets only 1 to 2 times per week. This is not per day. Remember, there's sort of generally 3 meals per day, but this is per week. And then notably, what's so important is the amount of meat that's in the Mediterranean diet, 1 to 4 times per month. So that's really once a week, but even better if you can get to once a month. So when you're sitting down to your meal, this is what your plate should look like. It should look predominantly, the majority of your plate, the majority of your bowl should really be full of the vegetables and the fruits and the avocado. A quarter or even less should be the rice, the pasta, the couscous, and a quarter should be the beans, the fish, and very rarely the meat. And think about if you go out to a restaurant, for example, what our plates actually look like. It's quite reverse, where you have that piece of meat or that piece of fish taking up the majority of the plate, and then you get the side of the vegetables or the side of the potatoes. And I want us to start thinking very differently about our plate. It should be start with that green, start with those fruits and vegetables, and then add a little bit of the extra stuff on top of it. Okay, so that's all there is to protecting the liver. Let's move to, for patients with cirrhosis, it's a different nutritional strategy where now the liver function is becoming impaired and the nutritional strategy should focus on supporting the body's needs. I'm going to give you another simple phrase to remember for this strategy, and that is to eat enough of the right stuff at the right time. Let's start with eating enough. It has been shown that patients with cirrhosis have incredibly high energy needs. And in order to meet up with the body's needs in patients with cirrhosis, the general recommendations out there put out by multiple societies at this point, including the AASLD, with our recent malnutrition practice guidance that was released in July, is that patients with cirrhosis with a body mass index less than 30 should consume approximately 35 kilocalories per kilogram of body weight per day. Patients with a body mass index of 30 to 40 should consume about 25 to 35 kilocalories per kilogram of body weight per day, and greater than, if they have a body mass index of greater than 40, then that kilocalorie limit goes down to 20 to 25. Now, I just did some back of the envelope calculations, and for the average individual who's 150 pounds, this might come out to anywhere between 1,700 kilocalories to up to 2,500 calories per day. And for somebody who's 200 pounds, for example, this might be anywhere from 2,300 to 3,000 calories per day. That's actually quite a lot of calories. What I recommend is that you, if possible, you consult with a registered dietitian to directly measure your resting energy expenditure to get a sense of what is your personalized caloric need living with cirrhosis. But something you can do just right now while you're listening to this talk, go to wellnesstoolbox.ca. This is a website that was developed by another hepatology champion out there, Dr. Punita Tandon, and you can actually use the nutrition calculator to estimate your resting energy expenditure in a patient with cirrhosis, and depending upon whether you have fluid retention or not. Now, I have been using this strategy and telling my patients this for many, many years, and I've heard a number of barriers to getting enough calories in. So I want to just talk to you about some of the barriers that I most commonly hear from my patients. I get full really fast. This is super common. There's early satiety is a big problem. And for this, I recommend a strategy of eating often. So eat small meals, but every 3 to 4 hours. Don't just eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but eat breakfast and then a mid-morning snack, then lunch, and mid-afternoon snack, dinner, and then a late evening snack. And then I also want you to focus on high density foods. I want you to start thinking about foods in terms of their density. If you can imagine something like a salad has it's a lot of space in your stomach, but not a lot of calories. That would be a low density food. A high density food would be something like nuts or chia seeds. Anyone who's heard any of my talks knows I don't get through a nutrition talk without mentioning chia seeds. Lots of calories, good fats, good proteins, any foods like that, but with taking up a very small amount of space. So your body you don't stimulate those receptors that say, oh, my stomach is stretching and therefore I'm full. A second barrier that I hear often from my patients is that food tastes really different. And I recommend that you combat this barrier with food variety every time you go to the supermarket, I want you to buy one new food at the store every single time. Even better if you can replace one of the sort of unhealthy foods or the junk foods with a better food, like, like nuts, like hemp hearts, like chia seeds. The third is that, well, oftentimes we're recommending to our patients to adhere to a low sodium diet. And my patients say the low sodium diet makes food taste really bad. Well, there are other ways to flavor your food. Garlic, lemon, chili flakes, turmeric, even just black pepper. So go for some more zing to your diet to sort of trick your taste buds. But sometimes, and we even recommended this very explicitly in our nutrition guidance that we just released, sometimes you need to relax the salt restriction. If you're really starting to get frail and weak and have muscle mass, it is more important for you to get calories than it is to adhere to a very, very strict sodium restriction. Okay, let's move on to the second portion of the eat enough of the right stuff. What is the right stuff? Protein. You really need to emphasize protein. The recommended daily protein intake is 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Here are some just rough calculations based on where you are. So if you're 140 pounds, that's about 75 to 95 grams of protein per day. If you're 250 pounds, that's about 130 to 165 grams per day. Now, if your provider has told you to reduce the amount of calories per day, if you are on a recommendation to lose body weight, you can reduce the calories you take in per day, but you have to maintain the protein intake. So do not restrict the protein intake, okay? Now, let's get a little bit more specific. I looked at my diet over the last 2 weeks, and I came up with a list of great sources, good sources, and other foods. This is actually my diet aside from chicken. I just added chicken because I don't eat meat. But this is just a general kind of diet of mine. And I Googled everything that I was eating and how much protein was in a serving of each of the things that I ate. And I put them on different lists. And you can see, for example, great sources of protein: Greek yogurt, edamame, almonds or pistachios. Good sources might be peanut butter, brown rice, an egg. Other foods might be an avocado, a frozen yogurt. Even your orange has some protein in it. So, I don't want you to think that protein only means eating chunks of meat. Okay, so now let's start building some meals. So I have an avocado that is getting very ripe, so I need to eat that today for lunch, but that only has 4 grams of protein. So what might I pair it up with? I might pair it up with brown rice, beans. Boom, you just got almost 25 grams of protein here. Okay, what else? White rice. I can't go more than 48 hours without a cup of white rice. Doesn't have a lot of protein. But what if I paired it up with tofu, a cup of tofu, and then some roasted broccoli? Almost 30 grams of protein in this meal, even though the base was a base of white rice. Now, of course, got to satisfy the sweet tooth just a little bit. If I'm allowed, ice cream. You might finish one meal a week and treat yourself with a scoop of ice cream. Not a lot of protein. But what if you just sprinkled a handful of almonds or pistachios or walnuts on top of that? You almost got up to 20 grams of protein with an ice cream base. So I want you to do this with your own foods. I want you to take a look at your diet over the last 2 weeks. What did you eat? Put them on 3 different lists of great sources, good sources, and other foods, and start matching up. Put it on your fridge, and you can get up to your daily protein intake with some with just a little bit of intention of pairing up your foods. I want to emphasize this point because a lot of my patients tell me that they have read on the internet or heard from other individuals that if you have hepatic encephalopathy, you should restrict your protein, and that is categorically not true. If you restrict your protein if you have cirrhosis and you restrict your protein, you will waste away, and that will be lethal. We have methods of treating hepatic encephalopathy, so that you should not restrict your protein, even if you have hepatic encephalopathy. And then lastly, it is very important to eat at the right time. The late evening snack has been demonstrated time and time again to improve, to benefit patients with cirrhosis. The reason is that patients with cirrhosis have, or the cirrhotic liver, I should say, has a decreased ability to release sugar as fuel. That results in increased breakdown of muscle to meet the body's needs and leads to accelerated malnutrition, muscle loss, and frailty. One very old but interesting study demonstrated that the metabolic profile of a patient with cirrhosis after an overnight fast was equivalent to the metabolic profile of a healthy person after 3 days of starvation. So patients with cirrhosis who have prolonged fasting periods, even just 12 hours overnight, are going into the starvation mode day in, day out. The late evening snack in patients with cirrhosis improves muscle mass, liver function, and quality of life. And the ideal snack is about 200 calories and contains about 13 grams of protein or more. I love to recommend in my own clinical practice a cup of Greek yogurt with a couple of crushed walnuts on top as the perfect late evening snack. So as you go out into the real world after this talk and start to implement some of these strategies, whether it be eat food, not too much, mostly plants if you don't have cirrhosis, or whether it's eat enough of the right stuff at the right time if you do have cirrhosis, I want to just offer you some overarching principles. The first is I am providing you with general recommendations, but it's very important that you inform yourself with your personalized needs. Go on to an online calculator or discuss this with a registered dietitian to understand your daily calorie and protein needs based on your personal characteristics. There are great nutrition calculators and personalized resources available at wellnesstoolbox.ca or cirrhosiscare.ca. And then you have to understand not just what your needs are, but what you're taking in. So I recommend that you start to quantify your intake. Now, I know realistically, from personal experience even, but also from taking care of patients, that it's very hard to quantify your intake at all times forever. So I just recommend that you commit to a 1 to 2 week trial. Download a free online app on your smartphone or on the computer, and then just commit to doing 1 week where you're just going to log in what you ate and everything you ate, so you can understand how many calories you're taking in, what is the protein content, what's the salt content. This is very helpful information just to get a sense of whether you are meeting up with your nutritional needs. Now, although this is a talk on nutrition, the partner to nutrition is exercise. And it's absolutely critical that you use exercise, because exercise is the way that all of those nutrients from your bloodstream get sucked up and soaked up into the muscle as your storage unit. Exercise can take on many different forms, as I'm showing you here with these pictures, but it's important to make sure that you do both cardiovascular exercise as well as muscle building exercises at a rate of about 150 minutes per week, alternating cardiovascular exercise with muscle strengthening, making sure you do muscle strengthening at least 2 times per week. And lastly, give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. It is very difficult to make nutritional changes, but you can do it. Make one change at a time, 1 week at a time. Aim for better, not perfect. You don't have to have perfect days, perfect weeks. It's just that we're trying to get better than what we used to do. And make sure you congratulate yourself when you do it, when you do something intentionally, when you do something you're supposed to do. Celebrate those successes. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, that's really great. I think that there's a lot to take in there in everything that Dr. Lai has sort of put out there. I think one of the things that's interesting as you look in the chat is that there's people who are sort of taken aback by some of this, by like, oh, well, wait a minute, what if I have this? Oh, well, what if I, there's a lot of questions. And I think that's indicative of sort of the situation with regards to nutrition as it's related to liver disease. I know because I was, as anyone who's been part of my care team will tell you, I ask a lot of questions. I can drive them a little bananas sometimes. So thinking of that, we have some time available for questions, and we wanted to open up and maybe I can't see the questions on here anymore.
Yeah, I saw some on coffee. I think a couple questions related to coffee, Laz. Like,
I have 3 on coffee.
Right. Yeah, go ahead. So let's get the coffee questions at you.
So there was a coffee. I'm gonna group these. Can you take caffeine supplements? What if you have insomnia? So how do you deal with that? And is milk good or bad? Those were 3 that right off I wrote down.
I do not recommend caffeine supplements. That the studies have not shown it's really, actually, we don't quite understand what component of coffee it is that protects the liver. The recommendation on coffee has really been from these observational studies where we just looked at people who drank coffee. So we don't know. There might be something in the black coffee that is not the caffeine. So no on the caffeine supplements. Number 2, I get this question all the time. Well, why can't I have my splash of creamer with the coffee? What I'm saying is that, or what the studies are saying is, it's not like all of a sudden you neutralize the effects of coffee, but you don't want to be drinking those large coffees with all the cream and sugar in it and the whipped cream, because the cream and sugar, and it's just added sugar, it's added calories. And so that's the recommendation of coffee. Sure, the coffee in that frothy, creamy milk is still probably good, but what's happening is you're getting extra sugar, excess calories from all that extra stuff that you put in the coffee.
There's some questions I see here related to whether they're starting to come in really quickly now. Give me 1 second.
I know. Oh, yeah, the insomnia question. Absolutely. You need to personalize the, we need to personalize these recommendations. So I'm not saying everyone should be drinking coffee all day. I too cannot sleep if I drink coffee past 10 a.m. So, use these pieces of advice, but, adapt them for your own lifestyle.
Another question is related to gluten and dairy for autoimmune liver disease. Any thoughts on eliminating them?
I have not seen evidence, strong evidence to support eliminating either gluten or dairy in the setting of autoimmune liver disease.
Someone just posted, does everything that we've just discussed is it also for transplant recipients?
Interesting. So yes, everything that we just discussed is for transplant recipients, although a transplant recipient immediately after transplant has an otherwise healthy liver. And so it is just as important, and patients who have undergone a transplant can get recurrent disease of their liver. And importantly, we are seeing increasingly that transplant recipients are getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease at very, very high rates. So I would recommend transplant recipients who do not have recurrent cirrhosis should follow the protect your liver strategies.
Okay, 1 second. Something else here. Someone's asking about supplements, and it's not wasn't part of this. Although I've got several people who are asking, they've heard about milk thistle and other turmeric and other things. What do you recommend with regards to this?
Yeah, so there are lots of small studies, single center studies, small studies that support the benefits of milk thistle and turmeric. There are also other small studies that support SAMe, or, there are lots of supplements for which you can find one single study. But when we pool the evidence, so this is kind of the next level of evidence that we're looking for, what we call a systematic review or a meta-analysis, where you take the data from all of the studies and put them together. There's not convincing or overwhelming evidence to support either milk thistle or turmeric, or really any supplement. So I would say that you should absolutely talk to your liver provider about supplements. I will tell you what I say in my clinical practice, because I know some of my patients are on here. I do not recommend milk thistle. I think that there's a lot of evidence, pooled evidence, to suggest at this current time, milk thistle does not clearly show benefit. I do actually support my patients if they want to take turmeric supplements. But I do ask, and this is my personal practice, I can tell you for sure that not all hepatologists would agree, but I do ask that my patients, if they are going to start a supplement, like a turmeric supplement, that they let me know so that we can just carefully monitor their liver enzymes to make sure that we're not getting into trouble with drug-induced liver injury. But I've not seen drug-induced liver injury with turmeric supplements. It is not reported in the NIH Liver Tox website. So I support turmeric, and I don't support any other supplement use.
It's important that it be bioactivated with a little pepper.
That's correct. It has to be bioactive, and you can't just like sprinkle turmeric on your food because it's not bioavailable. Absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any other questions out there? I have a couple of heavy hitters here. If there aren't, oh, there's 4 more that just popped through. Oh, well, someone wants to know the dose on the turmeric.
Oh, I honestly don't know. I'm sorry.
I think there's some standard dosing stuff out there that is pretty easy to find. If you're going to do turmeric, make sure it's bioactive and find out what the normal doses are and go to town, right? So look, I have a question that I think needs to be asked is, how is it that much of what you champion on nutrition is not the standard? How is it that it's not really standardized yet across the care for liver disease? How is that?
It's a very important question. Every provider knows that nutrition is important and believes it's important. I think the problem is that the evidence is oftentimes conflicting, and they're not the highest level of evidence like randomized clinical trials that we would want to see with, such as, for example, Xifaxan for hepatic encephalopathy or beta blockers for non-selective beta blockers for esophageal varices. We don't have that RCT evidence. I think the difficulty with nutrition is nutrition is not a single pill. It is a strategy. It is a lifestyle. It's a way of eating. And so that is what makes it difficult for evidence-based providers to translate this strategy of eating in the absence of randomized clinical trials into clinical practice. But that's what you and I are here for, Laz, is that we know it's important. Well, we know from our own experiences that it improves the health and well-being of our patients. So it is our job and everybody else's job on this Zoom meeting to help champion this as a standard of care.
What's interesting, though, is that some other areas of health care, like, for example, endocrinology, they've standardized it. I mean, you go to an endocrinologist, the very first thing they do is like on their list of to-dos is go get your blood work, and then here's we're going to set you up with this nutritionist, and they have this list, and nutrition is like standard of care. And so, and the same sort of issues that I hear you saying now are the same sort of issues, but at the end of the day, if you see that someone's blood work, right, is changing because of the lifestyle changes they're making, the nutritional, and really we're calling it nutritional, but it really is lifestyle, right? So if the lifestyle stuff that you're doing is having a dramatic effect on your blood work and on the amount of liver, the steatosis in a liver, seems like
I think AASLD made this great step by championing, by commissioning really this nutrition guidance as a first step, and then they also opened up this forum for Nutrition 101 for patients with chronic liver disease, right? So this is a great first step, and it is going to take all of our advocacy to really bring this into standard of care, and I think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Do you see a future where assessing frailty and sarcopenia becomes a part of the process of assessment when someone comes in, just like they assess you for MELD, they assess you for this, they assess you for that?
Absolutely.
Do you see that as something that's going to be happening, or that we're on our way there?
Yeah, we're on our way there. One of the unmet needs that our team at UCSF saw was that there wasn't a tool to diagnose frailty, and the tools to diagnose muscle loss also weren't quite in popular press, I would say, but that has really changed. There is now the Liver Frailty Index. We now know things like the Clinical Frail Scale, or just grip strength or 6-minute walk test. We now have standardized assessments with data to back them up that demonstrate they are strongly associated with outcomes in patients with cirrhosis. I can tell you for sure that at UCSF, we are using the Liver Frailty Index as a standard of care. And I know a lot of other centers are as well. And so it's happening. We're not there yet where everybody's using it like we use MELD score, but we're getting there.
Okay. One interesting question. Well, I mean, they're all good questions, but someone wanted to, hold on. One second, it just on the.
I see one interesting
caloric restriction.
Yeah, I was actually going to go on that one too. So caloric restriction in patients with NASH cirrhosis. So this is such an important question. It's really tricky. And I think we need much more data on the effects of weight loss in patients with cirrhosis. So in patients with NASH cirrhosis, it has been shown that weight loss, at least when the cirrhosis is compensated, so they don't have a lot of complications of cirrhosis, weight loss can actually improve portal hypertension, and weight loss can certainly improve the biochemical profiles and improve liver function ultimately. But it's very important that if you're going to restrict your calories, you still maintain enough protein. So this is where you really have to pair up with a registered dietitian and understand the content of your food. And so if you do have NASH cirrhosis and you are embarking upon a weight loss plan, it's so critical to involve the nutritionist. You follow up with your hepatologist very closely, but also quantify. You need to know what your daily caloric needs are. You need to know what your protein needs are. And then you need to make sure that you're getting that protein.
Someone's asking me, can I possibly get my NASH study? It's not really a study per se. I'm just like a one-person lab rat. But can I get my study in the public arena? This is part of that. This is, I felt, and I think Dr. Bansal felt this is a story that probably should be told, and I really appreciate her giving me the opportunity to do that. But I'll tell you what I'm doing that's really, it's really informed a lot is I go to these rooms on Facebook that have 8,000, 10,000 people with cirrhosis. And I feel like I'm being barraged by, and every morning I spend like about an hour answering people's questions because they're just not getting the information they need. They don't know, and they're terrified. They're mortally terrified. And I think it's really important that it would be great, use a pseudonym for some clinicians to go in and watch and listen to these conversations, because there's thousands of people in there who are saying their doctors are telling them go home, and not their standard of care is different from one place to the next. Not everyone has Dr. Bansal. I'm very, very lucky. But yeah, this is real deal. And I hope that if my story can help a few people, that things like this will help make that happen. I think we're good. Are there any other questions? Any last questions here?
I think there's another session, right, that we have to, but this was great. And I can expect, like a lot of our programming, this is going to be, I think, an annual event for updates for our liver programming. So stay tuned for, I guess it'll be Nutrition 102 next year.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was so fun to give this talk. It was so fun to pair up with a powerful patient advocate and to hear.
There was one quick question that people are dying to know. This whole concept of intermittent fasting,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I
The
didn't
5 to
know.
2. Yeah.
I think we have to stay tuned for Nutrition 102. I
Yeah,
do
we gotta
not,
look
I
that
will
up,
just
yeah.
say clearly, if you have cirrhosis, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you have cirrhosis, intermittent fasting would be detrimental. Okay, because the strategy for cirrhosis is the opposite. You have to eat frequently and all the time. But if you do not have cirrhosis, you have very early stage liver disease, particularly non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, it could be one strategy that might work for you to lose weight, which we know is beneficial for the liver, but there really are no data to support intermittent fasting as a strategy for patients without cirrhosis.
Fantastic, guys.
I did put the a link to the AASLD's guidelines or guidance. I'm not sure which one it's called. I put it in the chat if everyone wants to take a moment and go take a look and grab that link. It's a PDF. I can tell you that I printed it old school and like highlighted the parts that I found were pertinent for my needs, and it was extremely useful. So on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Lai. Thank you, Dr. Bansal, and Eamon Askapur, if you're out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.